after last week's State of the Nation announcement declaring a state of disaster over our electricity crisis. We, of course, are waiting further details. Who will the new electricity minister be? What exactly needs to be done to control the risks of ongoing load shedding? Well, I'm joined now by energy analyst Ted Blom. Ted, always great to chat to you. You've actually called for a state of disaster or a state of emergency over our electricity crisis, I think for almost a year now. Are you pleased with this news?
Absolutely, and I can give you the reason why I called for outside intervention, because it was very clear from my own experience at Eskom the third time round, as well as the utterances of Mr. Director, that getting things done within Eskom was nearly impossible. I saw when I was there in my third stint that the organisation had detuned in terms of ability, and had to compensate for that by having a regulation for virtually every activity that you want to engage in. So it became very, very regulatory in the workplace, and nearly impossible. In fact, easier to sit in your hands and do nothing than to actually do a day's work. So I think it's good that there has been outside intervention. I didn't know exactly what the form of or it would be, but we can see now whether the ANC is going to play an honest hand and nominate somebody who's capable, and you can bash the heads of the various ministries together to expedite whatever needs to be expedited and to create the necessary leverage for Eskom to be able to move forward.
Today, I spoke to Christopher Nereda from Agri SA, and he was telling me that the agricultural sector was actually in a meeting with the National Energy Crisis Committee today with Pravin Gordhan, Public Enterprises Minister, speaking to them specifically about what they want to see happen. Is this the sort of interaction you think is what needs to be happening more and more to really get a handle on what to do?
I think that wider engagement is always welcome. Most people that invest time and energy in looking and analysing the sector could probably make a small contribution one way or the other. And given that this is now a new super ministry inside the office of the presidency, I guess they need to be careful in scoping that job and making sure that it's exactly fine-tuned to deliver what every South African is waiting for.
I mean, details are scant on exactly what that electricity minister will do, and it'll be a difficult path, and we still don't know what the cabinet reshuffle will hold. But if we still have a public enterprises minister and we still have a Department of Minerals and Energy minister, there's going to be considerable risk for overlap, surely.
No, on paper, there's every reason to be concerned about overlap. So that's why I'm saying we need to wait until we get the scoping, the exact scoping, and the readjustment of the former ministries' portfolios, so that there can be clear delineation of how this is going to help Eskom move forward. But we can't sit with an Eskom that's not moving forward, because that means it's in reality going backwards, as we now see with stage 4 load shedding every single week.
You said at the beginning of our chat that this person has to be able to cut through everything, that there's such a sort of intractable situation in parts of Eskom that nothing actually gets done properly. It is so very difficult to manage Eskom. Do you have anyone in mind who you think might have that ability to cut through everything and get things done?
Yes, but I think if you want to engage with Eskom, you need to be in the capacities that we're talking about now. You need to be a qualified engineer one way or the other. Otherwise, they're going to pull the wool over your eyes, like the wool was pulled over everybody's eyes with the Itashi Chancellor House fraud with Medupi and Kusile. So it needs to be a qualified engineer. And secondly, it needs to be somebody who has at least 15 years sector experience. In other words, a senior practitioner, not a junior or a wannabe or a wish to be or whatever. Then we know we're on serious ground. Anything short of that, I think we're wasting our time. And then we need to get out on the streets and protest, because this matter is not going to get better on its own.
So one of the things that is being discussed, and it was raised also with the agriculture sector, is flexibility. They want flexibility around extreme levels of load shedding, so that critical infrastructure, so whether it's certain aspects of agriculture, but it's our water, which we know can't pump properly when we get to those extreme levels of load shedding, schools, hospitals. If we start looking at that, if the disaster plan starts looking at that, and there are really valid reasons, doesn't that obviously then mean that the rest of us, the average Joe, is going to be sitting with more extreme levels of load shedding to make up the energy shortfall while we look after critical infrastructure?
No, absolutely. It's a zero-sum game. So if you take away for some instances or institutions, it's certainly going to affect the rest of the institutions. I would hope that's why I'm calling for somebody that's an industry veteran. I would hope that person hits the ground running. And he would immediately, if he does the balance of, amongst others, agricultural South Africa and all the other unions and the hospitals, I'm talking about agricultural unions, and the hospitals and schools perhaps, when you add all the bond up and look at what the available supply is, hopefully it will initiate faster action. And the faster action is that we need to bring in additional capacity of, it was 3 to 5, it's now probably between 5 and 6 gigawatts. Bring it in for 3 years, not 20 years, and get the stuff rock and rolling as soon as possible. Every day that we delay is costing us jobs, it's costing us lives, and it's costing us a shrinkage in the GDP. I mean, it's really a no-brainer, and I can't understand why we have to wait and not get an expedited answer.
So, Ted, one of the things that people are raising concerns about, other people say it might not be a bad idea in the short term, is these power barges. We know that the 20-year deal with the car power ships is rightfully off the table because these are often just brought in for short-term emergency situations. Yes, there's a clear environmental concern. Do you believe there's a case to be made for perhaps bringing in some of these power ships for a limited period of time to help our grid?
Absolutely. I mean, when we had the load shedding in 2008, which I forecast by 3 days, I said, guys, we need to make contact. And I did make contact with power barges at that time. Technology's moved on, and you can still use power barges. They're just a bit more cumbersome because you've got to order them well in advance, possibly a year or longer. So that solution isn't going to be flying down our way soon. Or else there's equivalent of a power station, but a turbine run, but it doesn't stand on the water. You put it right next to your switchyard, and then you don't need to have extra cabling all over the show. And you can drop those wherever you need to have power. And you can far better balance the grid than what probably Eskom can do today.
So there are options. Ted, I want to ask you, because this is something that affects us as consumers. At the moment, we're cycling in a 3-4 pattern with load shedding. It seems that's going to be the status quo for a little while. Of course, anything can happen. Where are things at the moment? Are we still in an extremely fragile stage? We know that with the new financial year coming in, hopefully there'll be more money for diesel, and that is being called for. But in terms of how critical things are at the moment, where are we at and where are we going?
I would say that the patient's still in the ICU, and critical care is still needed. And the very things that Eskom has been hosting as excuses, and which the Rater and Oberholz have been complaining about, is the availability of funds to book long lead time items. Some lead time items need 2 years to be manufactured overseas and then be shipped to South Africa, and you've got to pay on order. And Eskom still is not getting access to that type of funding. Now, Eskom paid their creditors prepaid debt by 82 billion rand last year. Somebody's head should be on the chopping block for making that decision, because that money could be used now to expedite and fund the rehabilitation that's so dearly needed.
All right. Lots still to do, and whoever is going to be our electricity minister certainly has their work cut out from them. Thanks so much for chatting to us this evening. Energy analyst Ted Blom.